wasting all this stuff because, you know, you're just going to go be a redneck, trip over the transmission, B-student, loser farmer. And so I have now spent my lifetime trying to re-energize a new appreciation for the Jeffersonian intellectual agrarian. And I encourage farmers to go get a suit and read some books and join Toastmasters, join the local theater club, and learn how to storytell, communicate, and articulate the positions that you have, because we have the most sacred, noble vocation on the earth, and we should be able to stand toe-to-toe with any Fortune 500 CEO and articulate our positions. I'm going to start tonight by laying a context, in case you didn't realize it, that this isn't 1950 to 1960. Now, I know we all know that, but I'm going to lay out some big differences between today's agricultural landscape and indeed the whole framework of the country's landscape compared to the 1950s and 60s. Some of you may be old enough to remember the 1950s and 60s. I'm not. I'm just a young little kid. But some of you may remember that. My mom and dad bought our farm in 1961. I was just a little 4-year-old at the time. At the time, they bought 550 acres for $49,000, which was roughly $90 an acre, and feeder calves were selling for $30 a hundredweight. So the land was $90 an acre, feeder calves were selling for $30 a hundredweight, which is a, follow me now, I'm going to give you some math, so stay with me. 90 to 30 is a 3-to-1 ratio. Is everybody with me? $90 to $30. Today, that land is $7,000 an acre, and the feeder calves are, well, they're $1.50. Now, I know they're more than that right now, but just, we know this is an anomaly. I mean, we've never done this before, and Cattle Fact says it won't last another year. So just stay with me on this. Let's assume that these calves, these 5- and 6-weight calves, are $1.50. That is a 50-to-1 ratio. So we've moved from a 3-to-1 land value to commodity value to a 50-to-1 land value to commodity. This is not Grandpa's farm. It's not Grandpa's economy. It's not Grandpa's world. The point is that what worked for him does not work today. It does not. The climate simply does not exist. And so what's happened is today, the average American farmer is now almost 60 years old. Virginia Tech Ag Economic Department that charts these data says that in the next 15 years, 50% of America's agricultural equity will change hands. Think about that. In the next 15 years, 50% of America's agricultural equity will change hands. Now I ask you, so where's that equity going to go? Is it going to go to foreign interests and multinational corporations and global interests? Is going to follow Smithfield to China? Or would we allow ourselves the possibility to think that that equity could be gobbled up by a new generation of young, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, entrepreneurial, self-starter young people? Who would take this agricultural equity and actually not only serve the land, but serve their communities. You see, 40 years ago, that's not very long. Many of us in this room are 40 years old or more. 40 years ago, the farmer received 30 cents of every retail dollar. When somebody went and bought food, the farmer got 30 to 35 cents. Today, it's 9 cents and trending down. You realize that that means that we can have a new ag policy that said, you know what, let's just not pay farmers anything. From now on, farmers have to work for nothing. You just work for nothing, and we don't pay you anything for what you produce. It would only change the price of food 9 cents on the dollar. Back then, in 1946, that's the statistic I have, In 1946, the average morsel of food traveled less than 50 miles. Average! That included bananas and coffee and citrus in the wintertime. Average morsel of food, less than 50 miles it traveled. Today it travels over 1,500 miles. In 1900, it took half of a calorie of energy to put 1 calorie on the plate. Today it takes 15 calories of energy to put 1 calorie on the plate. Is this progress? Is this really progress? Back then, 40, 50 years ago, every community, I'm sure this one had it too, you had numerous community abattoirs. And if you wanted to have an animal butchered, you could take it to the community, the local, there were guys, there's numerous as mills in colonial America. There was one around every bend in the river. Today, you can't find one. Back then, community canneries were everywhere. People could go and use a community cannery and can green beans and applesauce. Today, we have a new language in the food and farming sector that we didn't have 40, 50 years ago. How many of you over 50 ever heard the phrase food allergy? I didn't know anybody with food allergy. It wasn't even discussed in school. Nobody was gluten-free. There were no food allergies. Who ever heard the word autism? Who ever heard the word salmonella, campylobacter, listeria, bovine spongiform encephalopathy? Learn how to say that. It's kind of like the names in the Old Testament. You don't have to say it right. Just say it fast, and everybody will think. This is a brand new language, a lexicon that's come up in recent years. What's going on? From food allergies to gluten intolerance to salmonella, campylobacter, and bovine spongiform encephalopathy. It's amazing that for 30 years the U.S. tried to take farmers like me to free steak dinners down to Bonanza and Ponderosa Steakhouse to teach us this new progressive scientific way of feeding dead cows to cows. And people like me that didn't buy into it were branded barbarian, Luddite, anti-science. What do you want to do? Go back to the Stone Age, barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, washboards, hearth cooking, and hoop skirts? Is that what you want to go back? I was jeered. And then suddenly there was this kind of big global universal, oops, maybe we shouldn't all have done that. I find it amazing that the people, the academics, the experts, the PhDs, who tried to shove feeding dead cows to dead cows for 30 years down our throats, now set themselves up as the principal repository of safe food. Isn't that amazing? Or what are we? Are we intellectual schizophrenias? Today, now think about another difference. In the 40s and 50s, our culture went through. We've talked about some good things, but there's some interesting things. During that time, breastfeeding was considered barbaric, Neanderthal. Remember that? We started Infamil and Similac, raised a generation of asthmatic sufferers, and through the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. Who would have guessed in the 50s that by 1971 we would have La Leche Lady and Lamaze class, and Dick Van Dyke, who paced the outside of the maternity ward, would give way to touchy-feely husbands and fathers to be that wanted to go see it and participate and hold her hand while it was going on. I think the greatest resource waste in our country, perhaps in the history of humankind, was the generation that decided not to breastfeed babies. All those breasts didn't get used. It's a terrible resource waste. Now, of course, we realize that there's a direct connection between that and breast cancer. Duh! Maybe we should have done it a little more like nature's template.
What do you mean?
Instead of worshiping egocentricity and hubris to express our unfettered dominion. This sets up a perfect storm. What I've just described in this context is a perfect storm, because what it means is that while we have a food and farming sector moving steadily down and industrializing pseudo-food, shortcut, anti-nature, chemicalized, mechanized progression, we have a brand new awareness that is spawning a local food tsunami, an integrity food tsunami. Maybe you guys don't see it here, but I can tell you around the country there are lots and lots of people that are ready to opt out of Walmart, that are ready to opt out of Smithfield and opt out of Tyson Foods and Purdue and Iowa Beef Packers. And they are ready to find food that they have a relationship with. This has led us to the idea, to the fact that what we have now in our food system is a fundamentally segregated system. Believe me, McDonald's and Burger King and Hardee's down the road here, they are net economic drains to this community. They are not buying Russell County beef. They are not buying Russell County chicken. If anybody has a chicken house in this county, for Tyson, Cargill, or any of the big guys, the chicken goes out of the county before coming back in nuggets. It goes out at a nickel a piece and comes back in at $3. That is a net economic drain to the county. And so what happens is that as these things move, as things have changed in the last 40 to 50 years, what we've got is a rural America that is more and more impoverished by the day, less and less opportunity and economic incentive to stay there as the wealth gets extracted, just like colonialism, from the rural area to the urban area where all the brains are. So when I wanted to farm and came back and I wanted to farm full time, we had always grown up with a couple of Guernsey milk cows. We always milked them, and we made butter and ice cream and buttermilk, cottage cheese, all that kind of thing. And I got to thinking, I said, you know what? And I wasn't afraid of hard work. I like hard work, love hard work. And I said, but I also have a brain. I actually think about things. And so I said, you know what? I could actually milk 10 cows by hand. It'll take an hour, right? But if you're good at it, you can milk 10 cows in an hour. Okay? And I can milk 10 cows an hour and sell it to my neighbors at supermarket prices. Not high because it's organic or grass. It just, remember, this was 1978, okay? I could just sell it to them at regular supermarket prices and make a really comfortable living on this farm. I got all excited about this for about 60 seconds until I realized what? Raw milk is illegal. Because the government has decreed that you and I cannot drink raw milk because it's a hazardous substance. But you can feed your kids all the Cocoa Puffs, Twinkies, Mountain Dew, and Cheerios that you want. So I said, well, I can't milk a cow. What else can we do? And we had these Mennonite Amish friends that for several years had raised about 200 or 300 pastured chickens, broilers. And basically they were trying to get their own, free, paid for, and everybody came and took their chickens live, a gunny sack, motto, and they'd take them down to the local butcher, because we still had one of those. They don't have it today, but there was a butcher down there who would do the chickens for them, so they'd take them down to a little custom butcher and get them done. And this family came to us. They were getting old, wanted to retire, and they said, "Would you be willing to take over this little chicken business? Because we want to get out of it. We're getting too old, but we really don't want to leave our customers hanging. We've got about 15 customers. We'd really like them to continue getting this good chicken." And I said, "Well, sure, I'd be glad to. I'd love to do that." And so because I had chickens as a kid, I started my chickens when I was 10 and all that. So now when I went to college, so I was ready to start back up. I knew how to butcher a chicken. I was happy. So I have to take it to the custom house. I'll do that. I'll make the whole retail dollar. Yeah. And get some margin and some value in instead of selling this chicken for 30 cents a pound live and then you paying the butcher another 30 cents a pound to get it butchered. I'll get the whole 60 cents. Remember, this is 30, 40 years ago. I'll keep it all, and I'll be able to actually make a living with these chickens. So we started down that path. I didn't ask anybody's permission. I couldn't imagine that what we thought we could do would be illegal. Who would think in the great American country that taking a couple hundred chickens, dressing them to neighbors who pre-ordered them and said, "Would you raise them for me? I'll come and pick them up on the butchering day," that such a thing would be illegal. Honestly, it never crossed my mind. Fast forward 10 years. We opened the door. There's a member of the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services flashing his big badge. It looks just like the NCIS on TV, I'm from the government, I'm the inspector, and what you're doing is illegal. I couldn't believe it. Fortunately, we had just been armed with an empirical independent laboratory test that did a colony-forming unit bacteria count in a 2-week Petri dish, solution. And guess what? To compare it, we got chickens out of the supermarket that were 40 chlorine baths, through the U.S. Gov, inspected with blue buzz. Cultured them at the same time in the same lab at the same way. Guess what? They averaged 3,600 colony-forming units of bacteria per milliliter to the second permutation, and I've already told you more than I understand. But that's the way they write in a chemical notation. 3,600 is the number to remember. Okay? And in this case, it's not like golf scores. Actually, more is worse. Just so you got the context, all right? 3,600 was the USDA certified, hours average. No chlorine, no vaccinations, no medications, no nothing. Ours averaged 133. Now, wouldn't you think that's a factor of 25 times? That's not 25%. It's 25 times here. Now, wouldn't you think that the inspectors who were standing there in our living room telling us we were illegal, wouldn't you think when they saw the empirical science, if they really wanted safe food, they would say, "Whoa, hold it, call Richmond, close the slaughterhouses, we're going to shut everything down until we can figure out how to get chicken this safe and clean to the Virginia consumer." Wouldn't you think they said that? Ooh! They adjusted their glasses on their noses, they looked down and they said, "Well, this isn't all we're interested in." I said, "Well, what else do you need?" Well, you need to have bathrooms. I said, "We're killing them 30 feet outside our back door. We got 2 in our house. Mom's got 2 in her house. She lives next door 30 feet away. We got 4 bathrooms. And if I got to go number 1, I step behind the tractor and go, what are you going to do about that?" They said, "Well, you have to have 12 changing lockers for your employees." I said, "We don't have any employees. You're looking at them. We're right here. And I got bedroom 50 feet away. I change clothes there." They said, "Well, you have to have impermeable walls to keep, the flies out and things like that because open air is inherently unsanitary." I said, "If we put impermeable walls, then it'll be dark and damp, fresh air and sunlight won't come through. Then we'll have to use toxic chlorine and germicides. And will adulterate our product. We can't comply because it would destroy our product cleanliness. We won that round. But it was hard fought. It was hard fought. And then, then we bought a little sawmill. We got 400 acres of timber. We're really a small open farm, a lot of acres of forest. We got a little sawmill. Guess what? It's illegal for me to mill my own board and turn it into a chair that I would sell to one of you, because that is manufacturing and illegal in an agricultural zone. So the only market for my lumber is to sell it in a low-value state. That means I have to rape the forest to make a living in timber, because there's not enough value to be able to make a living on a small cut every year. You wonder why we have to rape everything. You have to rape things when they don't have any value. Our bacon, right now, today, you come up to our farm store, our bacon is $15 a pound. Ooh, yeah, that's what I heard. This local food thing, bunch of elitist, greedy, sophisticates coming in. You can't feed the world. Why, this isn't even a credible food system. $15 a pound for bacon. I can just hear it. A smoker is illegal in an agricultural zone. Preserving it is illegal. You have to have an inspected commercial kitchen and a HACCP plan and 5 licenses. So guess what? Our pigs have to go 30 miles to a federally inspected abattoir, and then 60 miles over 2 mountains to a federally inspected curing house, and then 120 miles back to us, just so we can sell a pig born and raised right on our farm to our neighbor a 1/10 of a mile away from the farm. Talk about around Robin Hood's barn. This is insane. And now our county says that if you take a product off of your farm for value adding and bring it back onto your farm to sell, that is a manufactured item. You just become a Walmart. You can't do that on agricultural zone land. So the result of all this is that we have deprived our rural areas of the ability to enhance their income, and we've denied consumers and the market the ability to access local artisanal product. Both sides lose. The result is there ain't no money in farming. You ever heard that before? Why? Because the middleman makes all the money. Well, if that's where the money is, I want to be the middleman. But it's illegal for me to be the middleman. You see the conundrum. And that's why before you on your tables, you have 2 legislative bills. One is a constitutional amendment, and one is an amendment to the food and safety requirements that carve out a place for a lunatic fringe in the food system. See, it's what a culture does. It's what a culture does to its lunatic fringe. Now listen, I'm not telling people you shouldn't go to Walmart, and you know what? I promise I'll never picket a McDonald's, and I'll never dump cow manure on a McDonald's. They're just fine. They suit me fine, okay? And if you want to go buy Chef Boyardee from a can in the store, that suits me fine.
It sounds like you're
But what do we do to the innovative lunatic fringe? Because it is how we interact with the minority that determines whether we are a free or tyrannous society. It's always been that. I mean, it's gotten so bad that our neighbor who has a very large farm, he has a 200-acre pasture, one of the nicest, largest pastures in the area. He worked up a deal with some local, really sharp science, high school, middle school students to come out, and they make these model rockets. I mean, they're big model rockets. They're like 6 feet tall. You know, I mean, they're big, but you need a big area, to launch something like that. Well, the county has now closed them down because, according to the county attorney, farmland and recreation are incomplete. So we're supposed to walk around our farms all day with a really glum expression. You can be a farmer, but you can't have fun doing it. And what we've bred now is a bunch of hermit curmudgeon farmers who don't have viable enterprises to leave to their children, and children who desperately want to stay on the farm and can't figure out a way to make a salary because we have segregated our economy, we have segregated our food system to where there cannot be an integrated approach. This has led to an orthodoxy of thought. Let me run down some of this orthodoxy of thought. I hope you all are well enough history students to remember the Spanish Inquisition, all right? And the heretics, of course, were put on the rack if they didn't toe the line for the orthodoxy. So every culture has an orthodoxy. I mean, there was an orthodoxy one time that the world was flat. There was an orthodoxy one time that women shouldn't vote. There was an orthodoxy one time that slaves were not humans. You know, are you with me? There have always been orthodoxies. So here's some orthodoxies for today. Number one, industrial farms are more productive than small, diversified family farms. That is not true. It is an absolute absurdity. You can take the most grossly novice, poorly done backyard garden, and the productivity per square yard far exceeds the most ambitious industrial, genetically modified monocropping system out there. That's the truth. Because nature thrives on symbiotic complex relationships. It doesn't thrive on monoculture and monocrops. The current virulent porcine diarrhea that's killing 1 in 4 baby pigs in the U.S. right now as we sit here, driving the cost of pork through the roof, making the industry scramble, making the industry ask for government funding and taxpayer support to find a cure and a vaccine. Nobody is even thinking about maybe we shouldn't have 5,000 sows on a slatted floor over slurry and fecal particulate. Nobody dares to ask that question because it's not the orthodoxy. The orthodoxy is this is necessary to feed the world, and you can't feed the world any other way. So the question of an alternative production model, like pastured pigs with space-age, water delivery systems and control systems, like electric fencing and nursery shade cloths and tinker toy portable structures and all this. That kind of thing, that can never be. That can never be. On our farm, we're raising 1,000 hogs every year on pasture, in the woods, fattening them on acorns, getting $300 to $500 in feed savings off of our trees, and all of our grower suppliers and farrowers that use smaller groupings, outdoor kind of things, movement around, they're not having any porcine diarrhea. But the industry and the society can't dare to ask, could there be an alternative? Any more than the teachers union can dare to ask, is there any alternative education than more expensive bricks and mortar stuff? I guarantee you we would get much better education today if we paid our teachers, if we fired the bad teachers, dumb teachers too, if we fired the bad teachers and kept only the good teachers and put them in tents, we'd get a better education. What makes kids learn is not electronics and bricks and mortar and flush toilets, it's the stimulation of adult creativity. That's what makes kids learn. But we can't ask that question because the whole system, the orthodoxy is institutional bricks and mortar education with electronics. Same thing is true in farming. Another orthodoxy of our day is nature is just broken. Nature's broken and we gotta fix it. That's our orthodoxy. It includes the orthodoxy that nature's default position is sickness. The average farmer, when an animal gets sick, he doesn't look in the mirror and say, what did I do? Animal gets sick. His first thing is, oh, apparently that animal is pharmaceutically disadvantaged. And so all I have to do is reach for a different concoction. I must have not given him the right stuff. The heretics, like me, suggest that nature's default position is wellness, and if it's messed up, I messed it up. Nature works very well, thank you very much. What do we do with people like that? Do we mandatory vaccination programs? Do we make food safety modernization acts, which for the first time start using languages like it's not your cow is part of the national herd? It's not your chicken anymore, your chicken is part of the national flock? It's not your tomato anymore, your tomato is part of the national crop? Flock of tomatoes. That's what we're doing. That's the orthodoxy. It's not your call, my call. The orthodoxy militates against innovative antidotes to the prevailing problems of the status quo. That's what happens. And every time we have government intervention in the marketplace, it always skews the marketplace toward the big players currently riding high, protects them, and is prejudicial against the heretics.
Right.
And we deny ourselves, our culture, and our grandchildren the benefits that innovation can bring to the marketplace. Next, orthodoxy. The theme of agriculture should be grow it faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper. That's all that matters. Faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper. Everything's about production. Who wins the awards? Whoever produces the most pounds of milk per lactation, the most corn per acre, all this stuff. Faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper. But we all know that to win those awards, you have to kill your cow or kill your acre of corn. It's not profitable. In fact, nature moves to a balanced place. Well, even a car rebels when you put the pedal to the metal all day. You wear out the engine faster than if you go to a balance. I mean, we all know a faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper is not a noble goal. If it were, the average NFL football player would be dead at 57. The reason the average NFL football player dies at 57 is because when your neck is bigger than your head, you're a freaking nature. Nature weeds you out. So heretics like us dare to ask, how do we create a farm model that embraces the pigness of the pig and the chickenness of the chicken? Because what we find is happy pigs and happy chickens don't get sick. Happy tomato plants don't get sick. So we study in humility the template. We don't feed dead cows to cows, not because we hate the U.S., but because we look around the world and from wildebeest to elephants to bison, we don't see herbivores eating carrion. And so we embrace that template as, okay, there's wisdom there, and that becomes an ethical, moral boundary over our cleverness. Because, see, we're made in the image of God. We're pretty clever. We got opposing thumbs. Monkeys can't do this. And we got a great big brain.
Yeah.
And we're so clever that we can invent things that we can't morally, ethically, spiritually, or physically metabolize. My dad used to call this overrunning our headlights. And so what happens is we create things to our detriment and then spend generations trying to remediate the problems that our innovation created because it wasn't guided by an ethical, moral framework. But science is amoral. Down here at Virginia Tech, they're not asking. I guarantee you there's not one porcine study ever done at Virginia Tech where the question of how do we preserve the pigness of the pig was ever asked. Ever. Right now, in fact, they're studying how to genetically modify the pig and extract the stress gene so that we can abuse the pigs more, but at least they won't worry about it. And I suggest to you, I submit, that a culture that views life with that amount of disrespect will have the same abusive, dominion, condescending spirit toward its citizens and toward other cultures. Another orthodoxy. Fewer farmers are better. Who wants to farm? We'll have a much better culture if we have fewer farmers. Heretics like me say, I think it'd be great to have a lot more farmers. What Wes Jackson at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas calls a higher eyes to acres ratio. Is it just possible that if we had a higher eyes to acres ratio, we would treat our acres better?
Yeah.
Is that possible? See? Another orthodoxy. Safe food must be sterile. Safe food must be sterile. The only way that you can have safe food is if it's sterile. We've got to kill it in order for it to be safe. I mean, so what we have now is we have new regulations coming down from the FDA. We got the USDA and the FDA. New regulations coming down which are dropping the actual healthy bacteria for our, you and I have 3 trillion bacteria inside of us. We are that unsterile. In fact, if we could take an electron microscope of this room, there'd be all sorts of hanging viruses and bacteria all over your breath and your breath. And, who knows, we're probably breathing what an earthworm breathed 5 minutes ago. And, I mean, it's all a big mass of stuff, okay? And we've now got these regulations saying that the beneficial bacteria from living cheese has to be killed in order for it to be legal to be sold. And so now all the French cheeses and the artisanal cheeses are becoming illegal because in order to be safe, it has to be sterile. And heretics like me say, it's not about sterile, it's about a habitat in which the good bugs beat the bad bugs. What we want is a battleground. We want a battleground where the good guys beat the bad guys. Because actually, believe it or not, even in our fallen world, there are way more good bugs than bad bugs. Believe it or not, there are. And so all we have to do is create a good habitat. And trust me, food, in order to nourish us, needs to be able to decompose. No civilization in history has ever eaten so much food that won't rot. I mean, you take Velveeta cheese, squeeze it out of a tube on the table. You can walk away from it for 6 months. It doesn't get mold, it doesn't liquefy, it doesn't do anything. You bring real cheese in, put it on that table, in 48 hours, it looks like it, grew a bad hair day. And in a week, it sprouts legs and walks off. That's the cheese that our internal community wants. Another orthodoxy. Consumers are stupid. I've heard that from the head regulators. In fact, I even put it in my book. Everything I wanted to do was illegal because I couldn't believe it. They actually put it in writing that Virginia cannot trust consumers to make food decisions. The only people you can trust are the bureaucrats who get wined and dined by the industry and made paranoid by the industry, which is so unsafe, playing Russian roulette and pathogenicity and toxicity with our food system, that the consumer advocates demand relief and ask for regulations, which then deny market access to those of us who actually know how to solve these problems. And the consumers are so stupid they can't make any decisions. Another orthodoxy, businesses are evil. Businesses are evil. All businesses are actually out to destroy their customers. So we need the government to come in and make sure the businesses like their customers. And finally, segregation is better than irrigation. Than integration. Irrigation. Integration. How about done? Got it untied, actually. Okay. So what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this? The proposals you have on your table are all about a couple of things. Here's number one. Number one, safety is subjective. I'm going to give you a couple of alternative heretic ideas. Safety is subjective. You see, I actually think that people who feed their kids Twinkies, Cocoa Puffs, and Mountain Dew are abusing their children. Those are hazardous substances. That's not the orthodoxy. That's my belief. to bungee jump. But people can do it. I think it's unsafe to smoke. People can do it. You know, I find it amazing that we know that this year, this summer, we have 50 children in the U.S. drowning in backyard swimming pools. That happens every single year. We know we're going to have 50 kids drowning in backyard swimming pools. Where's the outrage? We haven't had one person die from unregulated food, backyard, neighbor-to-neighbor food commerce in decades. But everybody's running around paranoid that, oh, if we open that Pandora's box, we won't have enough hospitals to put people in. You know, just like 35 years ago, we began homeschooling our kids. We pulled the drapes. We didn't ask, we didn't tell. You know, you huddle down because the state had determined, big bold headlines from the educational elite, if we allow this aberrant behavior to continue, we won't be able to build enough insane asylums and jails for the miscreant children in such a neglected idea. Today, we have the same attitude toward people who want to drink raw milk. Home cure bacon, home canned green beans, make salsa, pickles, and all sorts of things that could stimulate not only the rural economy, but could actually allow farmers to access the money that Walmart's accessing. Right now, today, we're just getting ready. Is hunting season in down here yet? Bow season? Bow season. Yeah, okay. I always pick up the hunters real quick. You know, we're. Are you at 39 degrees? I mean, meat. If it goes over 39 degrees, it's got to be 39 degrees in like 100 minutes, or it's hazardous. I mean, it's got to be landfill. It's got to go to the rendering plant. So I hope all you bow hunters are making sure that within 100 minutes of shooting that deer, it's down to 39 degrees on the fifth rib, or it's got to be. We don't have that, do we? I find it fascinating that we allow people to go out and hunt deer that might have Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is deer equivalent to mad cow. Nobody asks, nobody questions. They can take that, shoot it on a 70-degree day, drag it back to the Bronco, through the squirrel dung and the sticks and rocks on a 70-degree day, put it proudly up on the hood, and drive around Lebanon in the afternoon setting sun. Well, oh man, it's so dark now I can't see to skin it out. I'll pull it up in the backyard, sits there in the backyard tree where the flies come on it and the birds roost above it and poop down on it. I'll cut it out next Saturday when I'm off of work. I'll clean it up. So then next Saturday they come and they butcher it and they put it in pieces. And you know what? They can feed it to their children. Safety is completely subjective. The only reason you can't do that with a pig, a beef, or a chicken is because there's economic value. It's the only reason. It has nothing to do with safety. And food safety laws, trust me, have nothing to do with safety. Now, I'm not saying we should get rid of it. All I'm saying is before you have legislation to allow a tiny segment of the population who dares to question this orthodoxy to opt out. And that is the way we demonstrate charitable freedom and liberty in our culture. So, finally, I would suggest, there are a lot of people that say, well, we can't give people that kind of freedom. People are dumb. I mean, they read People magazine. The average person is way more interested in the latest belly button piercing in Hollywood celebrity culture and dysfunction in the Kardashian household than they are what they're going to have for dinner. I get that. I absolutely understand. You know what? Those people are going to continue to go to Walmart. But there are some people who dare to question the orthodoxy. and between consenting adults, consumer, farmer. Consenting adults, are you with me on the language? Consenting adults. How much do we allow to happen between consenting adults? A lot of things. Can we allow consenting adults to voluntarily opt out of the society's orthodoxy? Or must we come in with a tyrannous hand and demand the rack and criminalization for anyone who would dare to question the orthodoxy? And I think that as a group of Republicans, as a group of Americans, as a group of Virginians, whose motto is death to tyrants, from this room may there grow a cry and a voice to remedy the kind of tyranny we've seen from both parties for a long time, who continue to demand the right and the necessity to wipe our bottoms, pick our noses, and protect us from all of the kinds of most fundamental decisions that humans have made throughout history. Let us be that voice to say, you know what, this has gone on long enough, and it's time to allow an antidote and a heretic voice to express itself in a time of orthodoxy. God helps us to do it. Thank you so much for letting me listen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. We'll 15 minutes? 15 minutes long? I mean, I don't want to, I mean, I know that we're a little bit behind, so we can pick up some time on that. They'll get their belly full of me pretty quick anyway. So let's take 15 minutes of questions. I'll watch the clock, and then we'll go on with the rest of the agenda for the night. And again, I really appreciate being here. You could have been anywhere tonight, so I don't take the fact that you chose to come spend the night here lightly, and salute you and thank you for that. I'm glad for arguments. I'm glad for kudos. I'm glad for just informational questions. What ifs? I'm very glad for any of that stuff. I can talk about this for 2 days. So just fire away and don't be bashful. I'm really quite harmless tonight. I don't have a fire on. Does anybody have a question? Yes. I'll restate the question. If I can hear it, I'll get it restated.
Could you enlighten us to the positions and dichotomy Farm Bureau has with its constituents?
Great question. The question is, can I enlighten us on the dichotomy of the tension within the Farm Bureau Federation between its kind of its leadership and its grassroots folks? Because you know, I liken it very much to the tension between denominational seminaries and local churches. If you notice throughout history, the seminaries, where the academics and theologians reside, are always far more liberal, can I say, than the local churches, who are far more conservative. They're down in the trenches. They're actually, you know, doing this every day. And so I see the same thing in the Farm Bureau Federation. It's basically an insurance company. Insurance companies love to eliminate risk. Okay. And so how do you define, if you're an insurance company, how do you define risk? Well, you're an insurance company. You don't know anything about food and farming. So where do you go to find out what is risky farm behavior? What is risky food behavior? Well, you go to the experts in the field. Where are the experts in the field? They're at Virginia Tech. They're in Monsanto. They're the CEOs of Tyson. Okay, I'll tell you what is risky behavior in food. Risky behavior is food that doesn't have a bureaucrat stamp on it. That's risky. Risky food is animals that aren't vaccinated. I mean, we're going to have an outbreak of brucellosis and hog cholera if we don't mandate vaccination. Risky behavior is those chickens up at Polyface Farm that run around in the fields and rub wattles and beaks with red-headed red-winged blackbirds and indigo buntings and carry those diseases to the science-based, environmentally controlled Tyson chicken houses. That's risky! And so just like my farm neighbors call me a bioterrorist, so the legislation and the insurance comes down. Here's risk. It took us, we now supply a couple of pallets of pork loins every month to the VA hospitals in Goochland County via a U.S. Food Services delivery truck. It took us 3 years to get on that truck. Some of the conversations included the Mid-Atlantic Vice President of vendor, whatever, paperwork for U.S. Food Services. She came down, got a tour of the farm. It was quite amazing to sit and have a discussion with her about risk. Everything's about risk. Litigation, it's all about, eliminating litigious ability. So everybody's trying to cover up, and make sure they're protected from any kind of a negligence thing. The most negligence being, personal responsibility among people. That's the most negligent thing can happen. And on that note, I was going into make sure I pick up on that point. I was going into D.C. the other day, and I'm riding on the metro, and a guy comes in, sits down across from me. His rear is 2 seats wide. Yeah, I'm not joking. I mean, this isn't an airplane. This is the metro train, His rear is 2 seats wide. He has about a 96-ounce, gulp slurpy, sugary drink. He's got cigarettes in his pocket, earbuds in his ear, a bag, about a 5-pound bag of nacho chips, whatever, Doritos. And he slumps down in the seat, and I'm looking at him, and you know what? I am offended that our country thinks I'm responsible for his health. That offends me. That's tyranny. That's not personal responsibility. So, we're sitting there talking, and she says, well, what are we going to do about this risk? I said, what risk? What it turned out is that they assume that animals come off of farms filthy and dirty. Because they do. I said, what if we could prove with Q-tip true culture tests, empirical science, that our animals don't have any of those diseases from the industrial farms? She didn't have an answer for 60 seconds. When you're having a conversation, that's a long pause. I'm just sitting there waiting. She finally says, we never even considered it. So here we have a plethora of regulations that the bureaucrats can't even interpret, that are too many for them to even read. That's why every time you call them, you get a different answer. Today, your room has to be pink. Next week, it has to be green. 3 days later, it has to be yellow. And so there's all this subjective stuff that never ends. There's always something new. A new screen, a new fly repellent, a new vaccine, a new dredge in the water bath, a new temperature thermometer for $1,000 for your acid plant. I mean, there's always something new. And what happens is that all of the regulations are assuming that the default position of food is it comes off of farms dirty. Those of us who have figured out how to get it off a farm clean don't get any concessions. Nothing. You see? And so, that's the orthodoxy. So, the insurance companies play golf together. They all drink the same Kool-Aid. It's not a conspiracy. If you say conspiracy, everybody says you're weird, right? You can't say conspiracy. What it is a fraternity of ideas. That's what it is. They've all gone to the same school. They all pass the same test. They all play golf together. And And so there is an orthodoxy. I hope you can remember that word tonight. We don't use it very much. But there is an orthodoxy in our culture that absolutely militates against the risk of innovation. And the reason that the United States right now leads the world in electronic innovation, from eBay to Craigslist to Angie's List to Amazon.com to, all of the electronic stuff, is because it was invented ahead of regulation. Yeah. Let me ask you something. If in order to put an item on eBay, you had to get a license as an eBay operator, and you had to get the fire marshal to come out and make sure that there was a fire extinguisher on the wall, because you get a hot bid and you don't burn a place down. A licensed fire extinguisher on the wall, and handicapped access to your office in case somebody actually wants to walk up to you, and doesn't want to email in, and an electrical license that came that looked at all your wiring to make sure it wasn't a jumbled web, under the desk, and an OSHA license that you didn't have a hazardous plywood desk table that when the first bid came in it was twice what you thought. You jumped up, you get a splinter in your hiney because the plywood makes your desk behind you. You see where I'm going with this? The question is, would we have eBay? And see, no, we wouldn't. We wouldn't. And that's why, folks, that's why local food right now is assumed to be elitist, pricey, difficult to get, and farmers can't access the money that's dying out there to be spent in the neighborhood. Why? Because of what I just described on eBay. And one of the frustrations that heretics like me have is trying to drum up support for something that people can't see. The problem is, everybody's got a gun, so the NRA has no trouble whipping us up to hold on to our guns. We can see them. But we don't know what we've lost. We don't know. And we go to the supermarket and you basically see 4-color cardboard advertising of every shape and size for basically a reconfiguration of corn and soybeans. And the kind of variety that Martha Washington cooked with in her cookbook, and Dolly Madison cooked with in her cookbook. Again, read it. You will find there 100 things that we've never even heard of today. They're indigenous things, from pawpaws to currants to chokecherries to everything else. Those would be ubiquitous in Lebanon. They would be available in the marketplace. You could get pawpaw quiche. You could get home stone ground noodles from pastured chickens and fresh sprouted quinoa grain. Okay, this could be done. The problem with the regulation is that it makes the licenses only affordable if you're big, and if you can only launch an innovative embryo big. See, all prototypes have to be birthed small. All babies are birthed small. We don't birth 40-pound babies. Oak trees aren't planted from a 20-foot oak tree. They're planted by an acorn. In order to have successional innovation, you have to have embryonic birth, small embryonic birth. And the problem with this market intervention on the part of the government is that those of us who have dreams of maybe having a full-time, maybe several employees of an artisanal cheese business, we have to start it with an overhead of paperwork, licensing, and infrastructure that is so large, our dream has to be birthed too big to be birthed. And so the dreams of you and your neighbors, of both farmers and consumers, the dreams of what could be, are still because of a tyrannous, heavy-handed, patronizing orthodoxy. God help us to change it. Now, may all of your carrots grow long and straight. May your radishes be large but not pithy. May tomato blossom end rot affect your Monsanto neighbors. May the coyotes be struck blind at your pastured chickens. May the rain fall gently on your fields, the wind be always at your back, your children rise and call you blessed, and may we all make our nest a better place to be inherited. Thank you so much.
Joel Salatin, everybody.